This presentation is actually almost all of it is Anne's work, so she's very gracious in her introduction of me. But she's been a partner and collaborator on this entire thing, and if it's understandable, it's due to her presentation. One of the things that I have noticed in Republican towns is, and this presentation is designed not to help reelect Democratic incumbents particularly, but although there are things in here that could benefit them, but this is designed to highlight the inactivity of Republican town councils and mayors in terms of dealing with the impact of new housing. They put it under the affordable housing slogan, but what it really is about is the market housing. So we start off with the idea, what does a candidate want to tell the voters about the future of their community? And how does she prepare for that future? The answer is that you begin with a deep understanding of what's going to impact the community over certain periods of time. So we'll take a look at the basics, and campaigns need to do a detailed bit of research for the areas they are representing. This is going to involve considerable work. So if you've got a campaign committee or you've got the county committee in your town, or any stray volunteers that happen to wander in, you can ask them to assist in this. The advantage of doing this work is to get to know the financial and infrastructure status of your town. So there's going to be a lot of data involved: plans, budgets, infrastructure, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So every town has got a master plan, and the master plan has to be updated every 10 years, but a lot of towns are way behind in that. And a lot of them, at least the couple that I've taken a look at, are depending on 2010 census data. And that's not particularly useful, because it's since 2010 that the developers have moved into a lot of towns, and you've got increases in the hundreds, if not thousands, of housing units. The housing plans that towns have include their plans to meet the Fair Housing Plan obligations, which most of the towns in Morris County are under that gun. And you need to check your town's official website for master plan and fair share plan documents. Or, and I found this out the other day, Google, put your town's name in there, Morris County Housing Plan Element Fair Share Plan, and that fair share plan, if they have filed it with the state and with the various courts, should come up. New homes, I'm sure, and using Denville as an example, Denville's going to have in the next couple of years at least 500 or 600 new housing units. And the new housing units may cause an increase in population, and those increases in population will cause impacts on infrastructure, environment, and many other aspects of a community. So at least in the towns I've looked at, there is no planning for the impact. So what you need to do is analyze the following, look at the 5 years prior, any projected data, 10 plus years for the municipal budget, infrastructure budgets, which you'll find under the capital expenditure budgets. And all this is, looking at all this stuff. Plus, you need to look at the Public Works Department to determine how many water main breaks there have been, see if you can track down how many gas lines have been broken and replaced, And then the biggie in here, although it's not a municipal council or mayor's area of concern legally, is the school district budget. And to determine some of that, you need to look at the number of bedrooms in the new housing. 1 and 2 bedroom places are not going to generate a lot of kids. You may get some, but not many. 3 bedroom apartments are going to generate probably on average 1.5 kids per unit. So if you've got a 130 unit project that's scheduled for your town, and 100 of those are 3 bedroom, you can pretty much count on at least 100 new students coming out of that one project in the next 3 or 4 years. Then you want to look at utilities, electric, gas, then environmental and stormwater management, and things you need to be concerned with to ground yourself in the finances of the town. Average property tax per resident, and all that information is available publicly. The tax rate for the town, and we'll get into some of the resources you can use to find this information. Average home assessment, and revenues will increase based on the number of new units. But what you want to, and I don't know if it's in this slideshow or not, but we do an analysis toward the end of Montville, because the biggest driver of property taxes is single family housing. You'll hear the argument that the new developments will produce property taxes, and they will, but then you're never told by either the town that approved these developments or the developer is what the cost is going to be. So if a new development comes in and it produces 100 kids, that's going to up the school budget by a considerable amount. And if you get enough new children into the system, you may find yourself looking at a new middle school or new elementary schools. And in today's market, a new middle school is going to run anywhere between 60 to 80 to $90 million. And the tax impact of that is going to be significant. So you also need to look at police and fire departments. A lot of towns are finding that they don't have enough volunteers for the fire department, those with existing volunteer departments, and they're having trouble recruiting. And the reason they're having trouble recruiting, first of all, it was bad before COVID. COVID made it a lot worse, and now they're just having trouble finding people to stand watch over the fire department during the day. So in some towns, the county is the functioning response unit during the day, and the town picks it up in the evening when more people are home. So you need to figure out what an increase in population will affect these department budgets. If you've got 35 cops in a town of 20,000 people, do the math. How many police do you have per 1,000? And how will the population increases affect them?
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about infrastructure and the impacts that new housing developments would have on this part of a municipality's overall structure. So we're looking, what we would recommend is that campaigns and committees look closely at what systems are currently being used in your town. Most towns have public and private, some have wells. So you need to know roughly what is your town's makeup in terms of, is it all of one? Is it a combination? How old are these systems? How safe are they? I can talk a little bit about Roxbury, that we have a couple of water systems over in the part of town that's over by Lake Hopatcong. And those wells, I think it was the wells, had to be shut down because there were certain contaminants that they hit a higher level. So those are the kind of issues that you would need to know about. And this is something that you can do when you're canvassing or doing any kind of outreach. Are the residents happy with what they have? And that's a big thing that can be definitely a part of forming a message going forward with it, with any candidate. Okay, now we talk about traffic. Morris County especially, but we're not unique in the state. I think New Jersey has a traffic problem. And so what you need to know is what your town is, the roads. We all think that, yes, it's a local road. Oh, that's a county road. It may help when you're talking with people about which roads are local, because some people think something's local and it turns out it's a county road, or vice versa. Which ones are state? Which ones are private? We found out with our last campaign that there's a street that's not far from my house. It's a private street. There's no sidewalks on it, stuff like that. And so how are the developers, as well as the local government, how are they planning to manage an influx or a change, even a traffic pattern change, something like that? It might not even be because of an increase. It could be a traffic change because of a development. Those kinds of things, try to find out what kind of plans. So then we also, our favorite thing, and I don't think this is unique to Roxbury, potholes. We have them all over. They seem to multiply like rabbits. But most towns have a paving plan. Find out if yours does. And most of the paving plans that we've looked at across the county tend to run on a 20-year cycle, which made sense in the 60s and 70s and early 80s when a lot of these plans were developed. Obviously, we've got more traffic. We've got different kinds of traffic because we have bigger vehicles. And you just want to make sure that you're aware of what your town's paving plan is, and is it realistic? Is it looking at the reality of what's going on? We have, a harsh winter, we have 2 mild winters. That's going to affect some of the traffic, as the road conditions and potholes too. And also sidewalks. Some towns have sidewalk plans, some don't. So it's a matter of researching to know what your town has.
You should look at a document that we will show you that lists all of the taxes collected and where they are spent or where they're allocated for in the, it's a abstract of ratables. So go back 5 years and take a look at the taxes that your town was charging, and I think you'll be surprised at the overall number. Take a look at those taxes 5 years ago and what they are now. And then when you're canvassing, if a resident has been there for more than 5 years, see if you can prod them into telling you what they think about the increases over that time period. Is your town, the key question here for me, is the town equipped to handle projected changes? And I think in a lot of these communities, the answer is no, because there is no, I can't tell you how many times I've stood before the Denville Town Council and said, look, you people have to plan for the impact. I'm not saying stop the housing development, because it probably can't be done under New Jersey law, but what you can do is plan for the impact, and they're not. So take a look at property taxes for the school district, property taxes if it's a joint district, property taxes for the municipality, and how will projected population changes affect those. Is there a relationship between your municipal council and the school district? May or may not be. But in 2008, I won a council seat in Denville because the president of the Board of Education lost his mind and put out a proposal for a $75 million middle school. Now, this was quite a while ago, but I went to knock on doors and I wanted to talk about the municipal budget. I wanted to talk about the things we could do as a municipality, and all anybody else wanted to talk about was the school. So pick up from the people you're talking to, and know the basics of the school district structure. because you will get questions all over the board as you go around, and the response that you don't want to give is, I'm sorry, but that's got nothing to do with the office I'm running for. Well, that doesn't sit very well with a lot of constituents. So you can tell them that this is not that the town council or mayor's position has no responsibility for this. However, this is what I know, and this is what I can tell you about that. Anne? No, that's still me.
It is still you unless you want me to talk about it.
I don't know. This is not real difficult
Okay.
or complicated. It's just you need to know what the are there any projected plans for natural gas extensions, for water and sewer lines, internet cable, and how does new housing impact those? I don't know enough about the wiring of the internet system to tell you how an additional 500 people or 500 housing units will have on the service you get, but there's going to be an impact. Natural gas is a public utility. They can pretty much do what they want. So if they decide that they want to put in new lines, they put in new lines, and they really don't need any approval from the town, but you can try and foster a cooperative sense as much as possible. Water and sewer are town responsibilities. I think a lot of towns, probably a lot more than we would realize, depend on wells for their water. I know Parsippany Reservoir, which is actually the Jersey City Reservoir, shares water with a couple of municipalities and has emergency drawdown agreements with others, but it's not that many. So, where else are they going to get their water except, from a rain barrel or from wells?
So I can add a little bit here as well. One of the things we found out in Roxbury was when the natural gas, when NJ Gas came to certain neighborhoods, it affected the paving schedule, because they obviously have to make, they have to go into the street, they have to get the line to a house. And so we found that if the natural gas had designated a certain neighborhood that they were going to be working in, that kind of put the paving project on hold. And they would put the gas lines in, notify homeowners and so on. And then they had to wait a certain amount of time before. And so they ended up, I think the NJ Gas ends up subsidizing a lot of the cost for paving those roads in the neighborhoods that they've worked in. And I don't think that's, I don't think that's just unique to Roxbury. I think that's kind of how that goes. So that's one way that some of these projects impact each other as well, and can also affect the budget for a town. One other thing I want to mention about the electrical stuff is I'm in a town that is notorious for power outages. For whatever reason, parts of Roxbury, we're right there with El Pacong, that we lose power if a squirrel sneezes on the line, and we lose it for a while. And it was worse during Sandy, but what we've learned is that the infrastructure, and we're with JCP&L, the infrastructure is really old here. We have transformer stations, and they blow, they flood, whatever. The town is kind of not really in a position to do much other than really work with JCP&L. And that also comes with tree work. When they're going to put in new lines, it involves trees. There's a lot of nuances to working with the electrical companies about when new developments go in, or when things, they have plans, they have to work with the town as well. So one other point about electrical is that there are some communities that have, I think it's called congregate, where it's like a collective, where the township can work, uses it as a collective bargaining to get certain generally lower pricing for their customers. So I know Roxbury had looked at participating in that, and our town council ultimately said no, but there are some towns that may be doing that. And so they would fall under a different kind of arrangement with the electrical company in terms of any new development. So that's all I wanted to add to that. Okay. All right, then I'm going to talk a little bit about environmental and stormwater management. This is kind of my gig. But this is just a little, this is not all that we could talk about. That could be a whole nother meeting. Same thing with the school budget type of thing. So things to know is check if there are any protected areas in your community or the district that you're running for. And if so, what are they? How much are they taking? Is the acreage in those that district or town, is it suitably zoned? And a lot of times that's going to shift, especially as we have changes in weather patterns. It might cause, there's more flooding or drought in some areas, and that's going to change some of the geography or the topography and all that too. If you're around a lake, Lake Hopatcong, Lake Musconetcong, there's certain that there have been areas that have been devastated, but also changed in some ways. So we got to look. You got to look at some of those areas. The new housing development plans include an environmental impact assessment. There's a lot of different terms for the same thing. They should have that, as well as commercial development, by the way. They should have that. And if they don't, is your town's planning board not holding those developers accountable for the impact that they would have? Stormwater management, multiple areas to look at. This is just a really basic list. Current flooding issues, lake, river, stream runoff issues. We've recently had something in the fall that was affected by new housing development, and it affected Lake Rogerine, which Roxbury shares with Randolph, I think. And the little lake, Lake Rogerine, literally turned brown because of a storm. The developer's storm water management plan was insufficient, and that caused the problem. And they were fined daily until they fixed it. Just an example of why those kinds of things need to be looked at, and have an idea, because it affects certain residents, and a lot of residents won't even know what's going on. What Morris County has is a county soil erosion group that those plans are certified, they are reviewed, or they're rejected. They are the authority that developers have to answer to when they put together their soil erosion and stormwater management plans. So these are things that if you have an area that has flooding or is near a body of water, these would be things that you should be looking at in terms of how are the residents being impacted, how are they being notified, and what are the developers doing to notify people. And back to Bob.
One of the things you can do, and Ann did it, or whoever did the white paper for her did it very well, is take a look at the new housing in each ward. If you have a ward system, or the number of new voters that are going to be coming out of some of these developments, and the sooner you can get to them, introduce yourself as a Democrat, would they like to register to vote and so forth, you're going to pick up supporters. And that, not only supporters, but you may pick up a couple of volunteers who can be particularly helpful to you. The reason you want to know a lot about the financial and infrastructure and so forth of your town is that it really lends credibility to the candidate. You can, and in doing so, it puts you on firm ground for, in Republican towns, for highlighting the failures of the current council. You want to craft your messages based on sound knowledge and a vision of where you want the town to go. Ann mentioned the natural gas company and so forth, and doing throwing off the paving schedule. Well, here we had new natural gas lines put in, and the deal with the town, which we only found out about after the fact, was that the gas company would pave half the road. So, you know, to me, that's it, and not half the road from a length point of view, but they cut it in half vertically or horizontally, whichever you want. So the road on one side of your car is paved, the road on the other side of your car is not. I mean, it was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. Annie, you want to go to the resources page?
We wanted, this is the thing I wanted to just kind of pop in there before we go to the resources, and a lot of the stuff Bob and I have talked about are listed with links to those resources. But one of the things that kind of came up among our caucus group talking about this presentation was there was a lot we didn't cover in this because we wanted to keep it to about a half an hour or so and then provide a lot of time for questions and answers. So some of the things we didn't cover that might be of interest: revenue opportunities for towns to help offset costs. They go by the names of abatements, give backs, stuff like that. And also that there's housing authorities that can be set up for a municipality, a county, and so on, that can help get state and federal grants for fair, the affordable housing, for fair housing, that there are opportunities to get revenue from other sources rather than just the local tax base. We didn't cover it all really about the impact, new housing development would have on the commercial infrastructure in a town, retail, restaurants, grocery shopping, drugstores, all of that stuff. We didn't talk about towns that have public transportation, how new housing would affect that too. And we did touch a little bit about the natural gas expansion. One thing that was brought up in our group today was, is this politically the right thing for Democrats to be pushing for? Natural gas, right? So, should we be pushing for greener energy sources and opportunities? Probably, but what does that look like? So the question we wanted to ask this audience, and we'll put it out to the caucus members who weren't able to attend tonight, should we have a part 2 presentation that covers some of these topics, as well as address any questions that come up from tonight? We can be contacted at resources@morrisdemsanalytics.org. If anybody wants a copy of this presentation, or if you have questions or even suggestions, that's probably the best way to contact us. And then we have all of our resources. We have a lot.
Right.
And so this would be in the PDF, and these are all hyperlinks that are active. We did verify all of these. We have a lot of them.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Go back to that.
Which one do you want me to go back to?
Second to the last.
Okay, hold on. And can I go back?
Just go back one.
I'm trying. It's not letting me. Hang on. Let me play while you guys talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
Sure. Ann and Bob, do you want to go to Q&A? There's one question in the chat, and it's from Christina. It has to do with estimating the number of kids that will come out of housing developments. I don't want to try to paraphrase her question, but she had an experience in Chatham that she.
Yeah, I read that.
related.
My first question on that, Christina, would be who paid for that study?
I believe the school district paid for it.
I would question that because the experience, and I wish I had a document to share or a spreadsheet or something like that to share about this, but based on experience in various areas, including my town, the more bedrooms that a condominium has, the more students you're going to get, because 3-bedroom apartments are designed for families. They're not designed for empty nesters that are trading down in size and expense and so forth. And they're not designed for bachelors. They're designed for families. So even if the estimates are off, let's say out of 500 new units, you have 350 of them are 3-bedroom, then you're going to, the likelihood is in 2 or 3 years, you're going to get 150 to 200 kids. Now, one of the reasons you need to be conversant with the school district is that what will that do to the schools?
Right.
In Denville, we are, the school district leased the old St. Mary's school from the Catholic diocese, and they've got 4 or 5 classrooms in there, and it's an adjunct of Riverview. The alternative to that was what they call trailers. Even though they're pretty substantial, they are still referred to as trailers so that the powers that be can use that in a referendum to get the money they want to build new things. But it's, and another example is the 100-unit rental complex that's behind the Denville train station. We were told by the developer and by the town that, oh no, there won't be any children coming out of that. Well, there are 14 kids who don't exist, according to the town and the developer. And each one of these kids, I'll give you an example from, and this needs to be used a little bit cautiously, but the average property tax paid by homeowners in Montville in 2021 was $13,140. Now that number is going to vary from town to town, and one of these resources will give you a town-by-town breakdown. So the cost of a student in the Montville school system is $27,220. Now that's an all-in number, and you'll see variations of it coming from people depending on what their point of view and what their interest is. But that's the all-in number. You take the gross school budget, divide it by the number of kids, and it comes up with an expense per student. You can reduce that by taking out transportation, because not every town has to supply transportation. You can take out a couple other factors, but it doesn't cut it in half by any means. So you have 2 kids in the school system, the cost is $54,440 in Montville, and you pay $13,140, leaving $41,300 for other people to pay. If a 100-unit project produces 220 children, they will cost almost $6 million a year to educate, while the homes they come from will pay $1.3 million in property taxes. That is the driver of property taxes. No matter what the powers that be have to say about that, the more homes you have in a town, the more kids you're going to get, the more children are going to go to school and the more it's going to cost. Now, personally, I don't mind paying my property taxes because we do have one of the best education systems in the country in this state. We always rank in the top 5 or top 6 for a state. Denville certainly has a more than adequate school system, even in terms of competition with the surrounding area, which includes Mountain Lakes and some other very wealthy areas. So we're doing good with that. And it's not an attack on the schools, it's planning. You're not going to, you don't want to build a building to house 20 people when you're going to consistently put 100 in it. And that's what it seems to me that the Republican run communities in this area are doing. They are just simply not planning. And that in it itself probably is a good issue.
Bob, in this particular instance that Christina brought up in Chatham, if the school board hired a demographer, I wouldn't think the school board would have any motivation to undercount the number of kids expected to join the school system, because the school board has control of the purse strings, right? They're not going to get political blowback if they overestimate somewhat the number of kids. So I wouldn't think they'd want to underestimate. I wouldn't think they'd deliberately hire a demographer who would underestimate. It could be they hired an incompetent demographer, but I wouldn't think that they would try to lowball it.
Well,
I included a link. I put it in the chat. There's a study that came out of Rutgers in 2018. It's a bit detailed, and maybe it's a subject of another meeting, but it may get to the root of some of those numbers. It says, what's the multiplier if you have a 4-bedroom house, and it was set in New Jersey, so it could be somewhat relevant.
what's their conclusion?
A lot of conclusions. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot to go through. I just, as I saw the question, I looked for something, and this looked interesting. Like I said,
I haven't seen this document. That's an interesting.
Yeah, so maybe it's what we're talking about.
I'm including that link to the second page of resources in this presentation. So if you get a copy of it, you'll have that link as well, and you can go into whatever detail you like to, but you will have that as well.
Well, if I just randomly pulled up one chart there, which says table 1.5 in that study. Single family, 3-bedroom household size, and this is a 2016 published date, 2.8 persons per household, and almost a half a kid per household. So my estimates of 100 or 200 kids coming out of 500 new homes may be a little low. And this does not include detached housing.
Yes, in chart 1.5, yes.
In the information we're dealing with.
Oh, okay.
So,
in this document, they have attached and detached.
So this seems like too much detail to go into for the purpose of this meeting, but just as a general theme, I would say this goes under the category of understand what the issues are in your town and understand what kind of analysis might be necessary to have an informed conversation with somebody.
I would think
where are the points of tension? So Chatham's a good example, right? Chatham's 2 towns, 1 school district. I live in Morris Township, where we've got some similar things going on. I think I've heard some stories about some folks in Chatham Township saying, hey, we want to split off from Chatham Borough. So be aware of the tensions and the kinds of arguments that people are making, and at least be able to speak about it knowledgeably. I'll put it that way.
Well, one of the things that all of these resources and this work is designed to do is to help candidates avoid the accusation, well, he, she is new in town, they don't know enough about the town. So, and it gives you as a candidate no greater pleasure than to stand before the town council and correct them on something they've got egregiously wrong, which I've had the pleasure of doing a couple of times. So I think that the first step for candidates as you begin to really mount your campaign is to go before your town council and ask them specifically what they're doing to prepare for the future. What are they doing? And mention all of those areas that we list in the slideshow. Not just schools, but police and fire.
One of the things we talked about, Bob and I, and with the rest of the caucus members, was to try to give this presentation literally as really a process that could be applied to almost any kind of campaign. It could be a county-wide one, it could be a local town one, it could be a congressional district one, or a legislative district one, is to, if you've got an idea of the kinds of questions that you think the voters are going to have, get to know so you can answer them. You don't want to lecture to them. You don't want to put all of this on a mailer. This would drive away voters like crazy, but we wanted to at least kind of present the process that we felt would help candidates and campaigns and committees for party building at least have as much content and know how to get that content to be informed to answer any questions that may come up.
Yeah,
and
I would spend some time going out and doing some canvassing and find out what your prospective constituents know about the town government. I think you'll be startled at the lack of knowledge. And you can ask, you can begin to frame your commentary in terms of, well, did you know that this was going to happen or that was going to happen? Or, of course, ask them what their concerns are, but you may need to prod them to get them talking about what they're, have you turned on your faucet and the water's brown? Have you turned on your faucet and there's no water? And that came, I just saw an email. I got an email from one of my neighbors this morning that asked if anybody else's water was brown. And what it was the third water main break in 3 weeks on the street that I live on. Now, fortunately, it didn't hit my house, but other people around here are being affected. So I think there's an underlying neglect from Republican office holders. And I'm finding the same thing to be true from town to town. You go before the Danville Town Council, you raise an issue with them, either the attorney answers or the town administrator answers, and our 7 members of council, if they're all there, sit there and nod their heads. And you first of all, rarely get a straight answer to your question. And secondly, it's becoming obvious that this is a tactic for whatever reason that they use. Same as in Montville. I'm familiar with both towns because my brother was on the Montville Township governing body for 15 years, and he follows it very closely. So, and that's one of his big complaints is that these guys do nothing. They're supposed to be leaders. You get elected to something, you're supposed to be a leader. Now, sometimes the people don't want to follow you, and you'll learn about that when you go for re-election. But a lot of times, you need to set a direction. We're going to do this. This is what I advocate, and this is why I advocate it. And also, don't put a lot of issues on a flyer or a mailer all at once. If you're going to do, the reason, everybody remembers this bud's for you. I defy anybody on this call to tell me the pharmaceutical advertising for the A1C reduction drug. it's just too complicated. It's just, and it appeals to a very narrow audience. But you need to keep it simple. And I can help you with that. I spent 40 years reducing fairly complex ideas into public relations materials. So I'll be happy to assist if anybody thinks they've got a complicated issue they want to reduce to more simplistic terms. So,
Does anybody have any other questions or any suggestions about this presentation? Because I am including a couple of the links that have been shared in the chat. They will be added to the presentation under the resources. So we want to make sure that, if you want a copy, it reflects some of the input from tonight. Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What do you call it? Low income housing.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
That's generally the term that's used in the circles now.
Yeah. Having a mental dysfunction. On the one hand, it seems to be unpopular. On the other hand, do we want the Democratic Party to stand against affordable housing for more affordable housing for more people?
Jim, we're not against affordable housing. That's
I know you got it.
has been a Democratic concept. What we are saying is that it's not, the affordable housing is not the problem. It's not the 16 units out of the 140 that are going to cause the town all kinds of difficulties. It's the other units. And what is not happening here is preparation to accommodate those market value houses. And what also is not happening is any political sense from the Republican-run towns that they know how to do it. So I think those are the issues. I wouldn't, attack affordable housing because I believe in it. And one of the things you need to understand about this whole difficulty, Chris Christie destroyed the Council on Affordable Housing, which was setting guidelines. Okay, and Christie never appointed the people he needed to appoint to the Council on Affordable Housing to make decisions.
Right.
And our dear Governor Murphy hasn't done it either. The legislature won't touch it. So, and I've heard Brian Bergen brag about it. Well, I've got bills that'll solve the problem. Well, no, you don't, Brian, because they're never going to see the light of day, for one thing. And secondly, if you want to be helpful, then fund planning for the impact of this housing.
Right.
And that would be more than helpful.
Yeah.
But he's not going to do it.
I'm for affordable housing too, but there seems to be a lot of resistance to it.
That could be a whole nother meeting, Jim, really, because there's a lot of undertones of racism involved in that too, and pay inequality. And there's a long history of that. One of the things to keep in mind with affordable housing is that the statutes were really only they shifted a lot. There's been a lot of litigation on the state level regarding this, and so a lot of towns had to hold off. But in a lot of ways, if they had started to do some of this before all that stuff happened, they wouldn't be in the now I got to catch up phase. Roxbury, I'm going to kind of punt this over to Mike because he's the one who wrote the white paper for the Roxbury Democrats in 2021, who talked about the fair housing plan for Roxbury.
How deep do you want to go?
Just a basic, give some numbers as to, because I think
in Roxbury, we're on the hook for about 450 more units. Well, if a developer isn't going to do 100% because they're not going to make any money doing that, so they're gonna do their housing project, their development, and they'll only set aside 20%. Right, this way we get the town gets its numbers and they get their money. So simple math says in order to do 400 and change units, you have to build 2,000 and change units in your town. Well, we only have 8,000 to start with. So that's a quarter of the town more that we're adding. Over the last 10 years, I went back 10 years, myself and Annie fought over this. I went back 10 years and our net number of units that we added over 10 years was 400. So there's no way this council, as they sit, have the experience to think of all the things that Eddie and Bob put in the presentation, to think of, you know, all the sewer lines and electricity and all that fun stuff. So just in our town, we have those kind of numbers that we're dealing with.
So Jim, to answer your question, and just think back over this presentation, I don't think at any time either Ann or I said, yes, we're in favor of affordable housing and everything that goes along with it. What we've done is, I think we have to accept the fact that affordable housing, the way they're going at it, is a given. I don't think we can realistically stop it. You know, if I could wave a magic wand and have just the affordable housing built in Denville, I would do that, but I can't, and there's no way to do that. But what we can do is focus on the shortcomings of the people in charge of the town as far as planning for this housing. And we refer to it as housing, not affordable or market, but it's the new housing that's going into town. And that's the focus of this presentation. And I hope it'll be the focus of the candidates, because you know, somebody's going to ask you, well, are you for affordable housing? And I think the response should be, look, it doesn't matter because none of us can do anything about it. But what we can do is figure out how many kids are going to be in the schools, how much the sewer gallonage is going to increase, what's the potable water system going to be, how many police at $135,000 each are we going to need? Will our volunteer fire departments hold up? All of these questions are questions that I don't think the average voter has focused on in the least. So, and Tammy, Tammy just put something up on the chat about how Lincoln Park is pretty much maxed out in terms of available space for development. Well,
Yeah.
that was the initial argument most of the towns made to the council on affordable housing, and second to, you know, the courts and the developers and so forth.
Yeah.
Parsippany was able to push back and get their number reduced.
Who was?
Parsippany.
Parsippany.
In fact,
Yeah.
I think there's articles on it out there also.
But they just approved a new 500 unit complex
Mhm.
right off Route 10 near East Hanover. So, you know,
And one of the things that Parsippany was able to do, though, is they were able to work with the developer to negotiate give backs, abatements, and so on, so that it was kind of a win-win. Yeah, we know you're going to build, so we want something out of it. That's the kind of stuff you want to look for.
well,
And
that's also
yeah.
that's also not happening in many of the towns.
that isn't happening, right? So that's why you need to find out, if you know that there's some of these development plans, what arrangement does your town, have they made? You know, are they looking for revenue from other sources? Are they looking for that kind of, you know, win-win relationship with the developer, so that it isn't?
Also, Denville granted a pilot, which is payment in lieu of taxes, to the guy that built the 100-unit rental complex behind the train station. That results in a reduced tax rate, and I think he paid 40% of what it would normally be valued at. None of that money goes to anything other than the municipal budget. Now, that's all well and good for the municipality, but that means that that complex is not paying its fair share for anything else. They have kids coming out of that unit into the school system. The school system gets no tax money from this whatsoever. So you want to be careful, and you want to look for pilot programs in some of these developments because it's designed to bring development to areas in need of redevelopment, which means abandoned factories and so forth and whatnot. Nobody has to give a tax break to build housing in this area. It's just it's just wrong. Yeah, it's showing the burglar where the silver is kept, and just so keep an eye out for that kind of stuff.
Does anybody have any other questions? We have a
Have a
couple of
second.
candidates here. We have a couple of candidates here. Do any of you guys have questions?
No,
Cool.
but I think this is a great presentation. You guys need to do more of this.
Okay, well, we are planning on it. So before we officially kicked off, we did talk about some of our upcoming program ideas. One of them is to how to determine your win or goal number for your campaign. And the part 2 of that is to how to build your universe to reach that win number. You're prioritizing your voters. So that's going to be a 2-parter. We're looking at when to have those. It would be the same kind of format, virtual presentation kind of idea. So we're looking probably, we think, towards end of April into May for both of those. So I really appreciate everybody's support for this, and thank you for coming. Again, I want to just make sure we've got everybody's questions. Do you have any suggestions before we send this out to people? Any suggestions on the presentation? Was it clear enough to read? It had everything you needed on it. Again, we're adding some of the resources based on the chat we've had. Is there anything else you think we should finesse with it before we send it out and make it available? If not, I'm cool. That's less work for me.
Yeah, I think the questions will come after the session and when people get a chance.
Sure.
Cheryl, you're going to accept requests for the recording?
Requests can come to, they can go to either us at resources@morrisanalytics.org, or, I'm going to kind of throw Adam and Shay under the bus. If somebody's like, oh yeah, hey, Morris County Dems, can you send it? We'll work it out with them too. So we'll have these available no matter who you reach out to. You can get a copy of the presentation slides as well as the recording.
Yeah, this email, resources at Morris County.
No, it's
MorrisDems Analytics.
MorrisDems Analytics. I'm going to put the
Yeah.
email.
Is that it? Is that what it is?
I believe. I'll double check so that we're not wrong.
Yes, please do.
Yes, that is it.
Okay,
That
good.
is it. So yes.
Anyway, Anne gets that. But
Yes.
it's official. It's our official email address.
Okay. So
I work only with your unofficial emails, guys. So.
Well, I want to say one more thank you to the candidates who are here tonight, because I know you guys are busy and you are candidates, and thank you very much for stepping up to serve. And we're all, I think, campaign, warriors at this point. So we know what it's like and we know what's ahead of you, and we'll do everything we can to support you. And if there's other topics that you think would help, especially campaigns for now, please let us know and we can do our geeky thing and put something together. But we're here to help you guys. So I do appreciate it very much. And I want to thank Bob, because he was wonderful as always. And I really appreciate that he brought this to our attention, that this is something that we thought that could help. And we put a lot of time in this to kind of streamline it. So thank you.
And it looks like Carol has her hand
Carol
up.
has a question. Thank you.
Yeah, can you put this on the Vandals Facebook page?
Yes, the PDF is going to be loaded into the files part of that page. But it'll be an announcement. And then when we have the recording ready to go, we will upload that and share that link as well.
Thank you so very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, and the link to join that group, if you are a van user and you are not in that group and you are on Facebook, please join. The link is in there. It's where Dave puts a lot of his stuff and the meeting announcements for his update meetings. And we are going to be putting links to our meetings in there too. And Cheryl and I are among the moderators of that, so we can always answer questions as well. And I think that's it, everybody. Any other comments or anything?
Thank
Okay.
you much, everybody.
Thank you so much and have a really nice night. It's a little colder than it looks outside, so bundle up if you're heading out, but thank you very much.
Buddy.
Okay, thank you so
Good
much.
night.
Right.
Good night.
And for anyone